Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks to the Hungry Gamers, back with another how to play video, and today we're going to learn how to play Hyperwars from Fabrizio Leotti and published by Dice Coalition Games. Now before I get started, please do note that everything you're going to see here in this box is still in the prototype phase and is subject to change, and you'll be able to find a link down in the description on how you can back this game on Kickstarter, or if it has not launched yet, where you can find more information about this particular game. What Hyperwars is it is a futuristic game in which different mega corporations are kind of battling for control of Urbana, this futuristic, violent, kind of run-down, slummy city. And basically what they're doing is they are all kind of dealing in illicit technologies and trying to corner, I guess you'll say, that the black market, as it were, on those. And the game itself is played in real time in 5-minute rounds, and each game will take about maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, including all of the setup. So let's find out how this game works. Now here are just about all of the components in the game. Each player will get 10 meeples in their color. Obviously, I only have one set right here. Then each player will collect one of each of these three types of cards here: a produce, a deliver, and a deploy/move. Note that they do not have red borders like this one does over here. So in this case, if I were to set up a game for 4 players, I would separate 4 of each of these cards and then give 1 to each player around the board. Along with that, you're going to want to set aside the orange biohacking unit cubes, as well as the large orange clone meeples, and also the green computer virus cubes, the blue cybernetic implant cubes, the red weapons cubes, and the white cloning matrix cubes. Additionally, you want to set aside your stack of objective cards. You'll take all the rest of the action cards, which you'll notice are made up of red bordered cards as well as other black bordered cards. You'll want to take all of those, you'll want to shuffle those up, and again set those aside for just a moment. Then you're going to want to set aside in 2 different stacks your upgrade tiles, which are the ones that have colored cubes here on the bottom left on their face, and there will be 4 of each of those, as well as the same colored tiles of attack tiles, which are in the same color, but down the bottom they have a barcode as opposed to a set number of cubes. And you'll want to set those off to the side as well. And you'll do that for all 4 of the different types. Finally, you'll separate out your district tiles. The first thing you need to determine is how many players are you playing with. If you're playing with 3 or 4 tiles, then you'll want to leave your tile like so, with the 4 squares around a single central square. However, if you are playing a 5-player game, you'll want to flip your tiles over to have the space that has 5 different areas in it. Then, depending on how many players you're playing with, you will select 1 tile more than the number of players. So if we were playing a 4-player game, we would select 5. If we were playing a 3-player game, we would select 4. A 5-player game, we would select 6. So for this moment, we'll pretend that we are playing a 3-player game, and I will select 4. And then the rest can go back into the box. And you'll see this is how you would set up a game for 3. And then you'll see this is how you would set up a game for 3 players. Now, the next thing that I need to say is, before you go any further, you have to decide on what rules level you're going to play with. What I'm going to be teaching you now is how to play the rules level 5, which is everything that's in the game. It is suggested that you start at rules level 1 and work your way up, because since this is a real-time game, having all of this stuff in the game from the get-go can feel overwhelming. And you can see on the screen some of the different setups that you do for the different rules levels. Now, the final thing that you're going to do is, in addition to their uniquely colored meeples, each player will take a bag. And in that bag, they will place 3 cloning matrices, 3 weapons, and 3 cybernetic implant cubes. And then drop them into their bag. And of course, you repeat that for every single player. The next to last step is you will then select all of the objective cards, give them a shuffle, and you will place 1 face down at the center of each tile. And then you'll draw 4 more and just place them off to the side. These will make sense in just a bit. Then, having finished that, starting with the player who most recently committed some sort of illegal activity, or if no one wants to admit that, or perhaps no one has, then and some other way to determine who gets to choose first. Each player will place a single one of their meeples on any area that they want. Now, before we can do that, we have to learn what the difference is between a district and an area. A district refers to a whole tile, while an area refers to one of the smaller squares, or if you're playing 5-player, the other shapes on each district. But in this case, each player will get to place a single meeple on an area of their choice. It is recommended that you place one close to yourself, which will make the game just a little bit easier once the timer starts. Then once that's done, you flip over all of the objective cards and give everyone a chance to examine them. Now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a bit closer now that you have an idea of what the whole board looks like, just so we can understand a little better of how this game is going to work now that we're going to get into the nuts and bolts. Now, if you recall, each player started the game with a produce, a deploy/move, and a deliver card. And so what's going to happen is, once the timer starts, every player will select one card from their hand and they'll play it face up in front of them. Now, as a reminder, everyone is making their plays at the same time. You place a card down in front of you, and then you carry out that action. Once you have completed that action, you will then take that card, and you will pass it to your right, and place it face down in front of another player. That card will now be one that they will have to pick up and pull into their hand. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about what each one of these cards does. And we will start with the deploy move. This is fairly simple. You have a choice of two things. You can either deploy, which means you can take one meeple from your supply and place it on any legal area. Now, you can deploy one of your meeples in the following ways. First off, if you already have a meeple somewhere in a district, then you may place another meeple alongside that. Like so, I could do that. However, what I could not do is place like this, because now I would have meeples in two different areas. That is not a legal play. Or if the district looked like this and I had none of my purple meeples there, and I could place it in any of these 3 areas. I could not place it right here because gray already has one of their meeples there. Now, there will never be the possibility of you being unable to get into a district because there is always the same number of areas available as there are players in the game. If you're playing with 3 players, we recommend that you take a meeple of another color and simply place it in an area on every district in the game, simply to block that one off. Now, the other thing that you can do is a move action. And a move action works as follows. Now, if I wanted to do a move, you are then allowed to move one or more meeples from one legal area to another legal area. In other words, you can take meeples from one district and place them in another district, like so. And it's important to note that you may have multiple meeples in a space. You are welcome to leave some meeples behind when you're taking that move action. The next action is the produce action. And the produce action is a 2-part action. You'll see we have the +3 cubes here and the -3 cubes here. What you're going to do is you're going to select 3 cubes from the available resources. So that means on the higher rules levels, you'll have a choice of 4 different colors from which to pick 3. You have your blue, your white, your red, and then you have your green. It should be noted that the greens work as wilds when they are used in combination with another color. So in other words, if those 2 were in my area, I would have 2 reds. However, if I had this in the area, I would have either 2 blue or 2 reds, depending on what is more useful for whatever it is that you are trying to do. However, as I said, you will take 3 cubes and then you will place them into your bag. Then you will shake your bag up and then you will draw 3 cubes back out. Then you're able to place these 3 cubes in any area where you have a meeple. So in this case, I would place them right here. The final action is the deliver action. You're allowed to take 1 or more cubes from one area which you control and send them to another area which you control. So by playing deliver, I could move 1 blue cube there, or if I wanted, I could move all of them or only 2. Again, it's up to me. Now, you'll note that there is 2 different actions for moving meeples and moving cubes. When you move a meeple from one area to another with the move action, you are not allowed to take any cubes with you. They stay in their area. In fact, this is something that's going to persist throughout anything in the game. Whenever your meeples move, they must leave whatever is there. And what that does mean is it does open the door if for some reason you leave something unattended for another player to claim them. In other words, if I had moved my meeple there, and left my cubes over there, the gray player could then play their own deploy move and simply move their meeple over to there, and now they have control of all of those cubes. Before I go into the other actions in the game, let's do a quick pause and talk about why it is that we are moving all of these cubes around. As you can see here in the middle, we have an objective tile, and all of them have different sets of requirements to fulfill them. In this case, at the end of the game, to score these points, you'll need to have 5 red cubes and 5 white cubes. And the first player at the end of the game who's able to accomplish it, and when we get to scoring, I'll explain how that is determined who goes first, will get 8 points, and then the second player and any player thereafter that does the same will get 5 points. And I will note that you're going to wind up losing points, 1 point for every additional cube that you have past the requirement. So if I were to have 6 red cubes and 5 white cubes, and I was the first one to complete it, I would actually only get 7 points. It is possible to go negative in your points, but again, we'll talk about this later when we get to the scoring phase. In addition to playing your action card and then passing it to the player next to you for it then to go into their hand, you do have another option. You are always able to draw a card from the action deck, and you simply draw it right off of the top of the deck. Then this card will come into your hand. It's important to note that you can only draw one card before playing another one. So in other words, if in my hand I had a deliver and a produce, and I was really hoping for a move, perhaps I would draw a card from the top of the deck. In this case, I have another produce card. I cannot then draw yet another card from the deck until I have played one of the cards in my hand. As you continue drawing cards from the deck, eventually you will get a card that has a red border like so. The red bordered cards have an additional effect. They allow you to do an improve action or an attack action, and both of those amount to pretty much the same thing, meaning you're going to be purchasing a tile from the middle of the board. It's also important to note that if you play one of these cards as an improve or attack action, the card is then discarded from the game. However, if you choose to use the action written on the card in the yellow, you would then take that and then pass it on to the next player just like you would with any other card. As I said, when you use that, you can either do an improve action or an attack action. First, we'll start talking about the improve action. For the improve action, you have a choice of 4 different types of tiles that you can get. And you'll note that each one of these in the bottom left corner of the tile tells you what the cost is. So in this case, you would have to pay 2 white cubes or 2 cloning matrices to get a cloning facility, 2 green here, 2 blue there, and 2 red here. And each one of these has a different effect. For 2 green cubes, you can draft a biohacking lab. And what that's going to mean is you're going to simply take 3 orange cubes and you will drop them into your bag. You will not take any cubes out. You will simply drop 3 of these in. We'll talk about how these are going to work at the end of the game and what their benefit is. For 2 blue cubes, you can draft an AI center. And what an AI center is going to do is there will be times when you find that your hand is filling up with cards that you can't use all of them at once. And having too many cards in your hand is detrimental to your score at the end of the game. Again, we'll talk about that at the end. But the AI Center allows you to play as many of the same type of card as you would like as a single action. So I could take all 3 of these deliver cards, play them as one deliver action, and then pass all of them to the next player around the table. The security zone is going to allow you to, at the very end of the game, before you score your cards in your hand, you'll be able to discard 2 cards out of your hand. It's also important to note that here, and with the biohacking lab and with the cloning facility, you can purchase this more than once. You can do the same with the AI Center, but it does not give you any kind of benefit if you do that. Then the cloning facility allows you to place 2 clones out onto areas that you control. You can either place them both in the same area, or you can spread those 2 out amongst different areas that you control around the board. It is important to note that, like with cubes, if you ever leave them alone, and another player comes in and takes over the area, they now control those clones. It is possible to move the clones along with any meeples that you have by taking a move action as well. No matter which improvement tiles you obtain, you'll place them face up in front of you. The other thing that you can get are the attack tiles. And attack tiles simply cost 2 cubes of any color or combination that you would like. And to use those, you simply must have control of them with your meeples in an area. So I could simply trade away 2 cybernetic implant cubes, or I could do 1 red weapon cubes and 1 blue cybernetic implant cube, and I could purchase any of these. Now, each of these are going to do something different, and again, they're broken down by color and what they do. However, before I explain how they actually work, what's going to happen is when you purchase one of these, you will take that tile, you'll place it face down in a district of your choice. All of them are going to come into play at the end of the game when we get to scoring. It's time for us to actually talk about how scoring is going to work. So when you come to the end of the game, you might have something that looks like this. And when the game ends, the first thing that will happen is each player will pick up any cards that have been passed to them that have not been pulled into their hand yet. Additionally, if a player has already placed a card face up in front of them, they will get to complete that action. However, they will not pass the card to the next player on the table. They would simply bring it back into their hand, unless, of course, it was an improve or attack, in which case the card would then be discarded. Then the next thing that happens is, starting with the lowest value objective, you go around the different districts and you score the objectives. So in this case, if there was another district that had this one here, since it is worth 6 points as opposed to 8 points, this one would be scored first. If there's ever a tie on the value, you simply go with which one has the most red cubes, and that one gets scored first. Then, once you come to the district that you're going to score, you flip over any and all attack tiles. Now for this example, I've put one of each so that I can then explain what each one is going to do. Now you'll notice that there are these barcodes at the bottom, and that's going to tell you the order that these different tiles activate. Whatever the highest number is will go first. I will point out that usually that is a red tile. So we will start with the red tile. What the red tile does is it is hired guns, and the hired guns are then able to remove any other attack tile around the board. In this case, perhaps they want to remove the data leak from the board so it will not activate. The next one that would activate would be this data leak. And if you remember, at the beginning of the game, we set aside 4 other objective tiles. And when you use the data leak, you can then take any of those objective tiles and swap it out with the one that's in the middle. Now in this case, it would not make any difference because yellow is unable to score it, but it is a way for you to change up what is happening in a given district to either help yourself score points or at least prevent anyone else from scoring points. And it is for this reason that usually a hired guns will almost always take out a data leak. Next we have the sleeper agent. And what the sleeper agent's going to do is it will allow you to move a clone in the same district to an area that you control. In other words, you can steal a clone from another player. And the importance of clones is going to be very clear in just one moment. And then you have the reinforcements. Reinforcements allows you to take a free move/deploy action, which means you could either deploy another meeple into that space from your supply, or you could move meeples from another tile into this area. However, it's important to note that you may not move meeples from an area on a district that has already been scored. And for the moment, I'm going to leave that reinforcement right there so I can illustrate how the scoring is going to work. And what's going to happen is you're going to look and see who has the most power. And power is determined by the number of meeples. Now clones, as it turns out, each count for 2 meeples. So in this case, our beige here has 2, 4, while purple has 1, 3, and then both yellow and gray only have 1. So that means that beige here has the most power and would get to score first. However, if you remember that reinforcements was there, and so before that happened, purple could have brought in, say, 2 meeples from another district and that has not been scored yet. So in this case, we have 5 for purple to 4 for beige, which means purple gets to score first. So purple would check and see if they have 5 red and 5 white. As you can see, they have 5 white right there, then they have 3 red, and then 2 green, which count as wild. So therefore, they have scored that, and they would gain 8 points. They placed their meeple right there. Then you go to the second most powerful, which is beige, and beige also has succeeded. So they would place their meeple there. They would gain 5 points because, as you can see, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 white, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red, like so. Then we look at our other 2 players here, and we start, since gray has more weapons, they would get to score next, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 white. However, they have 1 additional red cube. So though they do get to score 5 points, they will actually have a single negative point because they had too many of the cubes for that particular objective. And then yellow here could not score anything because they do not have the requirements. And so you'll go around to all of the different districts and you will score the tiles. The next thing that you will do is you will look at the orange cubes that are out on the board. Now, if you recall, if you purchased the biohacking lab, you would get 3 orange cubes. And though those cubes simply went into your bag, anytime that you play a produce action, you will also be pulling cubes out of your bag. So it is possible that you wind up pulling out orange cubes out of your bag. And this is how orange cubes score. For every 2 orange cubes you have out in an area you control, you will gain 1 point. However, for every 2 orange cubes that you have remaining in your bag at the end of the game, you will lose 1 point. Then the final bit of scoring is how many cards do you have left in your hands. For every 2 cards that you have left in your hand, again, that's also minus 1 point. However, before you score that, any player that has a security zone would get to discard 2 cards per security zone from their hand. So in the example I just gave, instead of losing 1 point for having 3 cards in my hand, I would lose no points for having a single card. Then whoever has the most points will be the winner. So there you have it, folks. That is Hyperwars and how it all works. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments, and I or the designer will get back to you as soon as we can. You can find a link in the description for how you can learn more about this game. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.